The Great Hall of Meridian Prime was the largest room ever built. It floated in the empty space between three galaxies, a monument to peace and cooperation. 4,000 species sent their leaders here every year to talk, to argue, and to make deals. The walls were made of living crystal that changed color with the mood of the room. Today, the crystals were a calm blue. Admiral Park Tai-ho stood near the back of the human section. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many wars end at negotiating tables. He wore his dress uniform without any medals. He never liked showing off. Beside him sat Ambassador Yoon Harry, a woman half his age with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She had stopped 3 wars with nothing but words. The galaxy called her the Peacemaker. Counselor Bae Jin-ho sat in the front row, quiet as always. He was the head of Earth's relations with other species, but he rarely spoke in public. He preferred to listen. He believed you learned more with your mouth closed. The summit was going well. Trade agreements were signed. Border disputes were settled. Old enemies shook hands or claws or tentacles. The human diplomats had been busy all week, translating languages, suggesting compromises, and calming tempers. This was what humanity did. This was what humanity was known for. Then the Vectari arrived. The Vectari were tall, insect-like creatures with black shells and red eyes. They came from a warrior culture that valued strength above all else. Their high commander, a massive creature named Threxus, walked into the hall like he owned it. His soldiers followed behind him, their weapons visible on their backs. The crystals in the walls flickered to an uneasy yellow. Hi, Commander Threxus did not sit with the other delegates. He walked to the center of the hall, where a speaking platform rose from the floor. No one had called for a speech. No one had invited him to speak, but the Vectari did not ask for permission. I have words for this council, Threxus announced. His voice was like rocks grinding together. I have words about the humans. Admiral Park felt his stomach tighten. Beside him, Ambassador Yoon leaned forward slightly. Threxus turned slowly, looking at all the gathered species. For 300 years, the humans have played at being peacemakers. They talk and talk and talk. They solve your little problems. They translate your little languages, and you thank them for it. You treat them like they are special. He made a sound that might have been laughter, but I see the truth. The humans are not special. They are weak. They hide behind words because they cannot fight. They are cowards who have fooled you all into thinking that talking is the same as strength. The hall was completely silent. The crystals had turned a dark orange. Threxus pointed one sharp claw at the human delegation. I say this to their faces because they will do nothing. They will smile and try to talk. That is all they know how to do. That is all they are good for. Every eye in the hall turned to the humans. 4,000 species waited to see what would happen. They expected Ambassador Yoon to stand. They expected one of her famous speeches, the kind that made enemies into friends and turned anger into understanding. She always knew what to say. Ambassador Yoon. Harry stood slowly. She looked at Threxus with no expression on her face. The hall leaned forward. She turned to look at Admiral Park. The old man met her eyes. For a long moment, something passed between them. A question. An answer. A decision. Park Tai-ho nodded once. Ambassador Yoon turned back to face the hall. She looked at Threxus. She looked at the thousands of watching delegates. She said nothing. Without a single word, she sat back down. The human delegation rose as one. Counselor Bae Jin-ho stood first, followed by Admiral Park, followed by every human in the hall. They walked toward the exit in perfect silence. Their footsteps echoed in the shocked quiet. No one spoke. No one explained. No one even looked angry. They simply left. The doors closed behind them. The hall exploded into chaos. Species who had never agreed on anything suddenly found themselves agreeing that something was very wrong. Delegates shouted at each other, demanding explanations that no one could give. The Vectari soldiers looked at their high commander, waiting for orders. Threxus stood on the speaking platform, suddenly unsure of himself. He had expected anger. He had expected a fight, or at least an argument. He had not expected nothing. In the corner of the hall, an old Thesari delegate was quietly gathering her things. The Thesari were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They remembered things that others had forgotten. They remembered the galaxy before humans came. A younger delegate from her staff approached her. "Elder, where are you going? The summit is not over." The old Thesari looked at him with ancient eyes. "Yes, it is," she said softly. "The humans have stopped talking. Do you understand what that means? It means they are offended. They will return when they calm down." The elder shook her head slowly. "The humans never stop talking. Never. They talk when they are happy. They talk when they are sad. They talk when they are angry. They believe that words can solve anything." She paused. "When humans stop talking, it means they have decided that words are no longer enough." She walked toward the exit, leaving the younger delegate confused and afraid. On his shuttle, Counselor Bagan Ho watched Meridian Prime grow smaller through the viewport. The station was still lit up, still full of panicking diplomats trying to understand what had just happened. His aide stood beside him, a young woman with worried eyes. "Sir," she said carefully, "what happens now?" Ginho did not look away from the window. His reflection stared back at him, calm and unreadable. "Now," he said quietly, "they remember why we chose words in the first place." The shuttle turned toward Earth. Behind them, the galaxy began to realize that something had changed forever. The humans had always been the ones who talked. The humans had always been the ones who found solutions. Without them, old arguments had no referee. Old wounds had no healer. The silence had begun, and no one knew how to make it stop. 3 weeks passed. Human space went dark. No ships crossed the border. No messages came through the communication channels. No diplomats answered calls. The great trade routes that connected human worlds to the rest of the galaxy sat empty, their space stations quiet and cold. It was as if 200 billion humans had simply vanished. Lieutenant Kong Sora stood on the observation deck of her ship, staring at the border of human space. She was young, only 26, with her mother's Korean features and her father's alien blue skin, half human, half something else. She had always felt caught between two worlds. Now one of those worlds had gone silent. "Anything?" her captain asked, walking up beside her. "Nothing, sir," Sora replied. "No signals. No movement. They have not even activated their defense systems." The captain frowned. "That makes no sense. If they were preparing for war, they would power up their weapons." Sora had thought about this for days. She had run every scan, checked every sensor, and analyzed every piece of data. The answer she had found scared her more than any weapon. "Sir," she said slowly, "I do not think they are preparing for war. I think they are ignoring us." "Ignoring us?" "The defense grid is cold. The trade stations are empty. But there are no evacuation signs. No panic. They are just continuing their lives. Without us," she paused, "it is like the entire galaxy stopped existing to them." The captain was quiet for a long moment. "That is worse than war," he said finally. "War, we could understand. Far away, on a trading station near the galactic core, an old man named O Daesun was having a very difficult week. Daesun was 70 years old. He had spent 50 of those years as a trade minister, buying and selling goods between human space and a dozen other species. He was good at his job. He understood numbers and negotiations and how to make everyone feel like they had one. But when the silence began, he had been outside human space. Now he could not go home, and everyone wanted to talk to him. "Please," the Vectari officer said, leaning across the table. "Just tell us what your people want. We can negotiate. We can apologize. Name your price." Daesun sighed and rubbed his tired eyes. "I have told you 17 times. I do not know. I was not part of any decision. I am just a merchant. But you are human. You must know something. I know that I am old. I am tired, and I would very much like to go home and see my grandchildren. He looked at the officer. Can you make that happen now? Then I cannot help you. This was his third kidnapping this week. The first group had been polite. The second had been desperate. This group was just confused. Everyone wanted answers from the only human they could find. Dae-sung had none to give. He thought about his granddaughter back on Earth. She was probably worried about him. Or maybe she was not. Maybe the humans on Earth were so focused on whatever they were deciding that they had forgotten about one old merchant stuck outside the border. That thought bothered him more than the kidnapping high commander. Threxus stood on the bridge of his warship. Looking at the fleet assembled before him, 200 of the most powerful vessels in the Vectari Navy, armed with enough weapons to crack planets. They floated in formation near the human border, waiting for his command. The humans think they can hide from us, Threxus told his officers. They think silence makes them strong. But silence is just another kind of weakness. Today, we will show them what true strength looks like. His officers cheered. The fleet began to move. They had traveled for less than an hour when a single ship appeared in their path. It was old. Ancient, really. A Dasari vessel, the kind that had sailed between stars before most species had discovered fire. Sir, his sensor officer reported that the Dasari ship is requesting communication. Threxus felt annoyance rise in his chest. The Thessari were peaceful, harmless. They spent their time remembering old things and writing poetry. They were no threat to anyone. Ignore them, he ordered. Sir, they say they have something to show you. Something about the humans. They say you need to see it before you cross that border. Threxus hesitated. He did not like the Sasari, but they were known for their honesty. They never lied. They never exaggerated. Fine, he growled. I will hear what they have to say. He transported to the Dasari vessel alone. The interior was dark and warm, filled with the smell of incense and old books. An ancient Thessari waited for him, her skin wrinkled and gray, her eyes clouded with age. Young warrior, she said, and her voice sounded like wind through dead leaves. You go to wake the humans. I must show you why that is unwise. I am not afraid of humans, Threxus said. You should be. She reached out and touched his forehead. This is a memory. From 4,000 years ago, from when the humans first came to the stars, the memory took him. He saw human ships. Thousands of them. Millions of them. He saw weapons that could unmake matter itself, that could turn stars into darkness. He saw species he did not recognize, fighting desperately against an enemy that never stopped coming. He saw planets burn. He saw entire civilizations disappear in single moments. He saw the humans march forward with cold, empty eyes. And he understood something terrible. The humans had not been diplomats. Not at first. They had been something else entirely. Something that made the Vectari look like children playing with toys. He saw the end of the war. He saw what was left. 11 species had existed before the humans stopped. None of them existed after. Not conquered. Not enslaved. Simply erased from the universe as if they had never been. And then he saw the humans look at what they had done. He saw the horror in their eyes. He saw them make a choice. They chose to stop. The memory ended. Threxus found himself on his knees, shaking. The old Dasari looked down at him with something like pity. They have been holding back for 300 years, she said. They talked because they were afraid of what they would do if they stopped talking. And now, young warrior, you have made them stop. Threxus returned to his ship. His officers waited eagerly for orders. Turn the fleet around, he said quietly, sir. Turn it around now. All ships retreat to Vectari space. His second-in-command stared at him. But, sir, we came here to show strength. If we retreat without fighting, we will look weak. Threxus looked at the human border. Somewhere beyond it, 200 billion humans were deciding something. He did not want to be here when they finished. They have not been talking, he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. They have been deciding, and we do not want to be here when they make up their minds. The fleet turned. Behind them, human space remained dark and silent, waiting. Station Eternity was the largest library in the known universe. It held the history of every species that had ever reached the stars. Millions of years of knowledge stored in crystals and data cores, and the living memories of ancient beings. If something had happened in the galaxy, Station Eternity had a record of it. Today, the station was filled with desperate researchers. They came from every corner of civilized space. Scientists and scholars and military advisors, all searching for the same thing. They wanted to understand the humans. They wanted to know what humanity would do next. They wanted to find something, anything, in the archives that would explain why the galaxy should not be afraid. They found almost nothing. Archivist Moon Yoonji sat in her small office, surrounded by requests she could not fulfill. She was 45 years old, a quiet woman who had spent her life studying alien cultures. She knew more about the history of other species than almost any human alive. But now, everyone wanted to know about her own species. And the records were sealed. "I am sorry," she told the 20th delegation that day. "Human pre-contact history is classified. I cannot unseal those files." "But why?" demanded a Vectari scholar. "Every other species has their history open. Why do humans hide theirs?" Yeonji did not have a good answer. She only knew that the records had been sealed since humanity joined the galactic community. No one had questioned it before. No one had cared. Now everyone cared. The door to her office opened, and an old Desiree walked in. Yeonji recognized the markings on her skin. This was Scholar Vexus, one of the most respected academics in the galaxy. She had lived for 4,000 years. She remembered things that happened before most species existed. "Archivist Moon," Vexus said in her dry, ancient voice, "I need to speak with you. Alone." Yoonji sent the other scholars away and closed the door. "How can I help you?" Vexus settled into a chair, her old joints creaking. "I do not need to search your archives," she said. "I carry my own records. The Sari memory is long. We do not forget. I do not understand. I was young when humanity came to the stars. Only 500 years old. But I remember..." Vexus's clouded eyes seemed to look through Yoonji into the past. "I remember what convinced your people to become diplomats. I remember what happened before." Yoonji felt cold. She had heard rumors, of course. Everyone had. But rumors were different from truth. "Will you tell me?" she asked quietly. "I will show you. But you must be prepared. The truth is not pleasant." Vexus reached out and touched Yuanji's hand. The Thesari gift of memory sharing was rare and sacred. It was not done lightly. The memories flooded in. Yeonji saw Earth as it had been 800 years ago, a world recovering from centuries of war. Humans had spent 1,000 years killing each other. They had invented new weapons every generation. They had perfected the art of destruction in ways that no other species had imagined. When they reached the stars, they found that they were not alone. The galaxy was full of life, and some of that life was hostile. The first alien attack came from a species called the Krell. They had seen human expansion and decided to stop it before it became a threat. They bombed 3 human colonies without warning, killing millions. Humanity responded. EUNG watched the human war machine wake up. She saw ships built in weeks that other species could not match in decades. She saw weapons designed not to win battles, but to end wars permanently. She saw the cold, terrible efficiency of a species that had spent 1,000 years fighting itself. The Krell were gone in 2 years. Not defeated, not conquered. Gone. Every Krell world was sterilized. Every Krell ship was destroyed. Every trace of their civilization was erased. But the humans did not stop. Other species had allied with the Krell. Other species had cheered when human colonies burned. Humanity remembered. Humanity always remembered. The war lasted 17 years. When it ended, 11 species had ceased to exist. The galaxy was quiet. Not peaceful. Just empty. And then something strange happened. The humans looked at what they had done. They looked at the dead worlds and the silent stars and the civilizations that would never rise again. And for the first time in their history, They felt something other than victory. They felt shame. Yanji saw the debates. She saw humans arguing not about how to continue the war, but about whether they should have started it. She saw leaders weeping over the destruction they had caused. She saw soldiers refusing to fire their weapons. She saw an entire species look at itself and decide to change. They chose diplomacy. Not because they were weak. Not because they had to. Because they understood that if they did not find another way, there would be nothing left. The memory ended. Yonji found herself crying. So you see, Vexus said gently, why your people sealed those records. They were not proud of who they used to be. Yonji wiped her eyes. But the weapons, the ships, they still have them? They never destroyed their weapons. They only promised not to use them. Vexus paused. For 300 years they have kept that promise. They have talked instead of fought. They have healed instead of destroyed. They chose to be different. And now? Vexus was quiet for a long moment. Now, someone has reminded them of who they used to be. Someone has made them angry enough to stop talking. The door opened. Captain Shin Woo-jin, the head of station security, stood in the doorway. He was human, tall, and serious, with the bearing of a former soldier. Archivist Moon, he said. There is a transmission from Earth. All channels. They are going to speak. Yunji looked at Vexus. The old Dasari's face was impossible to read. What do you think they will say? Yunji asked. Vexus stood slowly, leaning on her cane. I think she said that the galaxy is about to remember why it should have listened more carefully. Captain Shin led them to the main communication center. Thousands of beings were already gathered there, staring at screens that showed only static, waiting. Yunji found a place near the back. Her heart was beating fast. For her whole life she had believed that humanity was peaceful, that they were diplomats, that they had always been this way. Now she knew the truth. Her species had chosen peace, and choices could be changed. The static on the screens flickered. A voice came through, calm and measured. To all species of the Galactic Concord, humanity has concluded its deliberations. We have chosen to speak once more. The galaxy held its breath. Those who wish to listen may tune to the following frequency at the following time. This will be our only statement. The transmission ended. The coordinates and time appeared on every screen. In 3 standard days, humanity would break its silence, and no one knew whether to hope or to pray. The galaxy stopped. On every world, in every station, on every ship that could receive a signal, beings gathered to watch. Markets closed. Wars paused. Arguments stopped mid-sentence. For the first time in recorded history, 4,000 species did the same thing at the same moment. They listened. The screen showed a simple room. White walls. A wooden podium. Nothing else. No flags, no symbols, no display of power. Just empty space waiting to be filled. President Cho Murray walked to the podium alone. She was 57 years old. With gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, she wore a plain dark suit. No jewelry. No medals. She looked like someone's mother or grandmother. She looked ordinary. Behind her, visible through a window, stood General Baek Jun-ho. He was in full military uniform, but his hands were clasped behind his back. He was not there to threaten. He was there to remind. President Cho looked into the camera. Across the galaxy, trillions of eyes looked back. She began to speak. 300 years ago, my ancestors made a choice. Her voice was calm, not loud, not angry, just steady. They had just finished a war. Not a small war. Not a simple conflict. They had erased 11 species from existence. Completely. Permanently. The galaxy remembers those species only because the Thessari remember everything. But there are no monuments to them. No descendants. No planets where they once lived. They are simply gone. She paused, letting the words settle. My ancestors looked at what they had done, and they felt something that surprised them. They felt horror. Not at their enemies. Not at the war, at themselves, at what they were capable of, at how easy it had been. On Meridian Prime, the delegates of the Galactic Concord watched in complete silence. High Commander Threxus sat in the back row, his massive form hunched and small.
Ow.
They could have continued, President Cho said. They had the power. They had the weapons. The galaxy was terrified of them, and terror is a kind of respect. They could have ruled everything through fear, but they chose differently. They chose to build instead of destroy. They chose to heal instead of wound. They chose words over weapons. Not because they were weak, never because they were weak, but because they understood something important. She leaned forward slightly. The strong have a responsibility. The powerful must restrain themselves. Otherwise, there is nothing left but ashes and silence. On Station Eternity, Archivist Moon Yeonji watched with tears in her eyes. Beside her, Captain Shin Woo-jin stood at attention, his face unreadable. For 300 years, President Cho continued, we have kept our promise. We have mediated your conflicts. We have translated your languages. We have sat in endless meetings and listened to endless arguments and found endless compromises. We have been patient when patience was difficult. We have been kind when kindness was not returned.
Oh.
Her voice hardened slightly. Just slightly. He asked for nothing but respect. That respect was not given. The screens flickered. The image changed. Now there was a view of space. Stars in the distance, and in the center, a single asteroid. A dead rock floating in the void. The timestamp showed that this was happening live. This asteroid is an uninhabited space. President Cho's voice continued over the image. There is no life here, no value. It is just a rock. A beam of light appeared. It was not dramatic. It did not burn or explode or scatter debris. The asteroid was there, and then it was not. One moment it existed. The next moment, there was only empty space where it had been. No fragments. No dust. No trace that it had ever been real. The image returned to President Cho. Her expression had not changed. That weapon has existed for 400 years. We have never used it on a living target. We never intended to use it. It exists only so that we would remember what we are capable of, so that we would never forget the cost of losing control. On the Vectari homeworld, military commanders stared at their screens in shock. Their best weapons could destroy planets. This weapon had unmade matter itself. Today, President Cho said, we are showing you this. Not as a threat, not as a warning, but as a reminder. The galaxy seems to have forgotten who we are. The galaxy seems to have confused our patience for weakness, our kindness for fear. She straightened. Humanity chooses peace. We have always chosen peace. For 300 years, we have woken up every morning and made that choice again. It is not easy. It is not natural. It goes against every instinct that made our species survive. But we make that choice because we believe it is right. Her voice softened, but did not weaken. Do not test our patience. Do not mistake our choice for inability. We have shown you what we could do. Now we are asking you, very politely, to never give us a reason to do it. The camera moved closer to her face. The humans have spoken. This is our only statement. We will now return to our normal duties. We will continue to mediate. We will continue to translate. We will continue to serve the peace that we have chosen. She paused one final time. But we will remember this moment. And so should you. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, silence stretched for long seconds. Then, slowly, the reactions began. On Meridian Prime, High Commander Threxus stood. His officers looked at him, expecting anger, expecting defiance. Instead, he walked slowly toward the communication console. Draft a formal apology to Earth, he said quietly. Full diplomatic honors. Full acceptance of responsibility. His second-in-command stared. Sir, that will make us look weak. Threxus turned to look at him. I insulted them, he said. I called them cowards. I demanded that they prove their strength. He gestured at the screen, now dark. They only destroyed a rock. They could have destroyed anything. Anyone, they chose a rock. He walked toward the exit, his steps heavy. "We are not weak for apologizing," he said. "We are lucky to be alive." On Station Eternity, Captain Shin Woo-jin finally relaxed his military posture. He let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "It was a warning," he said quietly. "Just a warning." Archivist Moon Young-ji nodded. "They did not want war. They never wanted war. Then why show us the weapon?" Yoon-ji thought about the memories that Vexus had shared. She thought about her ancestors, horrified by what they had done. She thought about 300 years of patience and diplomacy and quiet restraint. "Because," she said slowly, "peace is harder than war. And sometimes you need to remind people why you fight so hard to keep it." Across the galaxy, communications channels exploded with messages, apologies, declarations of friendship, promises to behave better. Species that had spent centuries fighting each other suddenly found themselves agreeing that maybe, just maybe, they should try talking instead. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. 1 year had passed since the silence. The galaxy was different now. Not transformed overnight, but changed in small, important ways. Old enemies sat at the same tables. Old grudges were set aside. Species that had fought for centuries discovered that talking was easier than dying. Ambassador. Yoon Harry walked through the halls of Meridian Prime, the same halls she had walked out of 1 year ago, in complete silence. Now, delegates from 100 species nodded to her as she passed. Some bowed. Some simply stepped aside, giving her room. She was not sure which reaction bothered her more. The anniversary summit was about to begin. The Galactic Concord had ratified a new agreement. They called it the Covenant of Measured Response. It was a fancy name for a simple idea. Humanity would serve as the official judges of major disputes. If two species could not agree, humans would decide for them, and everyone would accept the decision. No one had voted against the covenant. No one had even argued. Harry entered the Great Hall and stopped. Every delegate in the room rose to their feet. 4,000 species, standing in silence. For her, she walked to the human section, trying to keep her face neutral. Admiral Park Tai-ho was not there. He had retired from active service, saying that the galaxy needed new faces. But Counselor Baijin-ho sat in the front row, as quiet as ever. He gave her a small nod. She sat, and the hall sat with her. The session began. Trade agreements were discussed. Border disputes were settled. Everything was polite. Everything was careful. No one raised their voice. No one made accusations. The crystals in the wall stayed a calm, peaceful blue. Harry should have been happy. This was what they had worked for. This was peace. But she could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. After the session, she found Counselor Baijin-ho standing by a window, looking out at the stars. "They are afraid of us," she said quietly. Gin-ho nodded slowly. "Yes. Is that what we wanted?" He was silent for a long time. "We wanted peace," he said finally. "We got it. Fear is just the price we paid. I became a diplomat because I believed in words. I believed that if you found the right words, you could solve anything." She looked at her hands. "Now they listen to me because they are scared of what happens if they do not. Is that so different from before?" Harry thought about it. Before they listened because they respected us. Now they listen because they remember the asteroid. Gin-ho turned to face her. His eyes were kind, but tired. "Ambassador, do you know what I saw when I watched the president's speech? I saw 4,000 species suddenly realize that violence has consequences. For centuries, they fought each other because they could, because the strong took from the weak and no one stopped them. We showed them a different way, by threatening them, by reminding them." He paused. "We did not threaten war. We showed them what we could do, and then we asked them to behave. The difference matters." On Earth, Admiral Park Tai-ho stood before a classroom of young cadets. They were the next generation of diplomats and officers. They would carry humanity's legacy forward, Some of you think the silence was a victory, he said. You think we showed the galaxy our strength, and they backed down? You think we won? He shook his head. Did not win anything. We spent 300 years building something. Trust, friendship, cooperation. In 1 month, we risked all of it. We reminded the galaxy that we are dangerous, and dangerous things are kept at a distance. A young cadet raised her hand. Sir, then why did we do it? Why not just ignore the insult and continue as before? Park considered the question. Because sometimes peace requires strength. If people believe they can push you without consequences, they will push harder and harder until something breaks. We had to show that there are limits, that patience has a boundary. He walked to the window and looked out at the sky. Hard part is not showing strength. Anyone can be strong. The hard part is knowing when to be gentle again. The hard part is putting down the weapon and picking up the handshake. He turned back to the class. That is your job now. To remind the galaxy that we are not just the species with the terrible weapons. We are also the species that chose not to use them. Both things must be true. The moment they forget one, we have failed. Young Officer Lee Ju-soo sat in the front row, listening carefully. She was 22 years old, fresh from the academy, about to begin her first assignment in the diplomatic corps. Everything she had learned about humanity's history felt new and heavy. After the lecture, she approached Admiral Park. Sir, she said, may I ask a question? He nodded. What happens if someone pushes us again? What if patience is not enough? Park looked at her for a long moment. She was so young, so hopeful. She reminded him of himself decades ago, before he had seen what humanity could do. Then we hope we are strong enough to make the right choice, he said. Again and again, forever. That sounds exhausting. It is, he smiled sadly. But the alternative is worse. 1 year later, Ambassador Yoon Harry stood at the viewport of Meridian Prime. The summit was over. The delegates were leaving. Another year of peace had been secured. Lieutenant Kong Sora walked up beside her. She had been promoted since the silence. Her work analyzing the human border had made her valuable. Now she served in the diplomatic corps, a bridge between two worlds. Do you think it will last? Sora asked. The peace. Harry watched a Vectari ship pass by the station. It dipped its wings in a gesture of respect. A year ago, that same species had called humanity cowards. Peace never lasts forever, Harry said. Nothing does. Then what is the point? Harry turned to look at her. Sora was young, caught between two worlds, still learning what it meant to carry humanity's weight. The point is that we choose it, Harry said. Every day. Every moment. We wake up and we decide to try again. We talk when we want to fight. We compromise when we want to win. We put down our weapons and pick up our words. She looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there, 4,000 species were learning to live together. Not perfectly, not easily, but they were trying. That is the human way, she said softly. We choose, and we keep choosing until the very end. Sora stood beside her in silence. The stars burned cold and distant, but between them, ships carried diplomats and traders and teachers. Messages flew at the speed of light, full of negotiations and agreements and apologies. The galaxy was not at peace because it had to be. It was at peace because humanity had asked, and for once, the galaxy had listened. Not out of fear, not out of respect, but because they finally understood that peace was not weakness. Peace was a choice. The hardest choice anyone could make, and humanity made it every single day.